When crime wears a uniform, how can we control it? Crime is not only committed by armed criminals, but also by some individuals entrusted to protect us, who instead use their authority to enable those very criminals. Minister of Defence, the Honourable Wayne Sturge, spoke openly by exposing challenges the public is not aware of during his presentation at a pre-budget consultation hosted by Dr. the Honourable David Lee, Member of Parliament for Caroni Central in Freeport last night. While other news channels only give you snippets of his speech due to time constraints, E500 television allows you to hear his full speech.
Can I ask, I'll make this as interactive as possible. First question, can I ask, do you agree that at this point, crime is the most burning issue in this country? It has always been, but now more so. Stand up. I'm told that because I am short, I should stand up. Now, we all know that our borders are porous, that's no secret. We all know because we have a serious influx from Venezuela, a serious influx of migrants from next door. And when they come, whilst many are fleeing persecution, political persecution and other types of persecution in Venezuela, there's a not insignificant number of them who are fleeing prosecution, which means there are elements who are more or less well entrenched among the criminal element in Venezuela. And they are here. They are here. But that's not something, and they are here and they are becoming entrenched here. And you are seeing a different level of violence, a different type of criminality to what we have known in the past. But we have taken steps to, in essence, deal with it in a frontal way. And you are seeing a different level of violence, a different type of criminality to what we have known in the past. But we have taken steps to, in essence, deal with it in a frontal way. So I'm very happy that you all agree that crime is the most pressing issue in the country. What I have to ask of you now is for you to, one, to be patient with us. We have to return to Parliament in a few days to seek an extension of the state of emergency in the first instance. And we ask that you be patient. There's a lot that will be revealed, but there's a lot that we ought not to reveal because we do not want to bother you too much and cause you to be too concerned, because the reality is we are in control and we have control of the situation. Let me just give you a little bit that I knew since before I was a member of Parliament, when I was a criminal defense attorney. Let me just give you an example. You would know that there are things that are allowed into prisons illegally. No one is surprised about marijuana and cocaine and other drugs and so on, and other types of contraband. But I don't know if you are aware that recently a couple guns were found in prison. That's a serious security risk. But to tell you how far we have descended and which is indicative of how fearful prison officers are of some of the elements, there's a certain prisoner, I won't call his name, a certain prisoner who had in his cell in the infamous Building 13, which is reserved for the worst of the worst. He had in his cell a very large flat-screen TV. You all heard of that? Yeah, I think it's 65 inches. Now, usually when you confront the prisons about how things are going, they don't seem to bring anything into the prison. It's always drones dropping us in. So I don't know how they dropped in a 65-inch TV. But on the one hand, we may believe that prison officers are corrupt. On the other hand, there's another dynamic to it. They are human beings, and they are subject to the same fears that we have. More so, where they work is where the prisoners live. And it's not hard to find out where they live, and so on. So they are obviously fearful. But the level of fear that they face, it has now reached the stage where it's easy for communications from some of the most dangerous prisoners to get out into the public domain and for them to carry out all sorts of nefarious activities without fear of detection, without fear of prosecution, without fear of punishment. It is going to be painful for some, but it is painful out of necessity, because the reality is we are facing an internecine war, which is we are at war with ourselves. There are factions who are at war with each other right here, and there are factions who are at war with the rest of us, with the law-abiding. Because crime is an industry, and crime is how they live. Crime is how they make money. Crime is how they enjoy the better things in life that the rest of us would try to work hard for. So we have, in the first instance, extracted 6 very dangerous persons out of the prisons. And it was necessary to extract them out of the prisons and to keep them elsewhere, because they were not properly restrained in the prisons. They may have been restrained physically, but their activities continued unabated, unrestrained, and had a deleterious effect on the wider society, and that needed to be curbed. In order to curb that, you have to cut off the head of the snake. And that is what we've done, in essence. But you see, I don't know if yesterday you heard a voice note circulating, and in the voice note, in essence, you would realize that although there was an extraction of 6 persons, one of the persons extracted was still able to make communication outside and is threatening to bring harm to law enforcement and so on. Those are things, I assure you, we have the capacity to deal with, and to deal with in short order. Now, I'm sure you have seen an upsurge of crime, particularly in a certain area, and that's Northeast, which is my constituency of Toko Sandigrandi. Every day when I read papers, I don't have a chance to flick through it, but I have people who go through it and underline and take out the stories relevant to Toko Sandigrandi. And when you see crime and Toko Sandigrandi 4 or 5 times serious crime in the newspaper, you have to be worried. It is a situation that we intend to deal with, because 3 of the 6 persons extracted, they are leaders of gangs that are heavily entrenched in Sangre Grande. So expect a lot of pain, but you have to get accustomed. They are at war with us. And we didn't initiate this war. We were in essence trying to protect you and trying to protect, defend ourselves, defend our country. Because they themselves have been infiltrated by a group from Venezuela, which is now designated as a terrorist group. And that itself is an initiative which would provide some support. Have you all heard of Tren de Agua? Right. So that's a Venezuelan, I don't want to call it a cartel, but they are mercenaries in essence. But they operate on behalf of drug cartels, and they are here. And they are integrating with our locals. And that's a very dangerous thing. And if we don't fight back at this stage and take the fight to them in a very frontal way, then before you know it, we are on the back foot, and in short order, there'll be very little we can do. So bear with us in the short term. Without saying too much, there are things we need to acquire. National security is not one of those ministries that brings in foreign exchange. Regrettably, it uses up a lot of foreign exchange. But in the short term, what we need to do is acquire the sort of technology that is not dependent on too much human intervention. Because when you rely too much on human intervention, human beings can obviously be corrupted. So there can be blind spots in a radar, in Carson Field or in Toco, and then you wonder how. And then you see a whole set of Venezuelan boats off Toco and you wonder why. And then you have to ask yourself if there are elements in the protective services who are working hand in hand with the elements. So we are trying to to acquire assets that do not place heavy reliance on human interventions and so on. Assets that would not only surveil, but assets that would intercept in such a way that there would be less risk to the lives of our protective services and greater risk to those who are at war with us. Some of them, there would be several layers to prevent migrants from coming to shore, because we all know the migrants, in essence, bring other things with them. But the bulk, what I know you may not be aware of, the bulk of our illegal firearms enter this country through ports, legal ports of entry. Did you all know that? Right. The legal ports of entry there are persons who control container terminal sheds who have been finding over the last few years, and others connected with them and others in national security, who in essence have been finding every reason not to operate the scanners. But we have found something that we are going to implement, and in short order we are going to try to stem the flow of illegal firearms. Once we get illegal firearms out and once we are able to extract them off of the street, I'm sure you'll see a serious drop in violent crime.
Thank you, Minister Sturge. Have a seat, Minister Sturge. You went over your time.